So the Cleveland Cavaliers have reportedly offered Isaac Okoro a multi-year contract extension somewhere in the range of $8 to $10 million per year. And up to this point, Okoro and his camp have declined to accept that offer, putting us into a pretty interesting situation with a number of potential outcomes. Option number one is Okoro can accept this lower offer and secure himself a long-term extension with the Cavs. His second option is accepting his qualifying offer, returning to the Cavs for $12 million this season, and then giving himself the opportunity to prove his worth and earn a larger payday as an unrestricted free agent next summer. The third and final option is a sign and trade, where the Cavs could give Okoro the contract he wants and then trade him to another team for something in return. I'm counting this as the last option because as of right now, it doesn't sound like Okoro has much leverage to getting the contract he wants and remaining in Cleveland. No other team has given him an offer sheet and restricted free agency, and I think this is a good place for us to start the discussion because the market almost always determines how valuable a player is. But in this case, Okoro's situation is unique for a few different reasons. First, the new CBA is influencing the way teams are spending their money. The middle class is going to continue shrinking as we see competitive teams search for ways to avoid hitting the first and second aprons. As for the Cavs, they have already dealt max extensions to 3 players, and they owe a large chunk of cap space to Jarrett Allen. This leaves them with little room to build out the supporting cast without being taxed or hitting the hard cap, and Okoro's upcoming contract is one of the things that could tip the scales. The Cavs flat out can't afford to give Okoro the type of contract that he is seeking without dealing with the consequences of this new CBA. And so unfortunately for Okoro, this is just really bad timing, and through his 4 seasons with the Cavs, he hasn't done quite enough to force anyone's hands and demand a larger contract. Okoro's value is really interesting to discuss because he is a genuinely impactful player due to his defense, but his offensive limitations are just impossible to ignore. Okoro has made tangible growth as a three-point shooter, going from a 29% shooter in his rookie season to shooting 37% over his last 3 years combined. But so far through his playoff career, Okoro is shooting just 27%, and his disappearance in the playoffs is likely what has cost him the bag this summer. If Okoro had just hit a few more shots and demanded some attention from the defense in the postseason, it would have been pretty easy to justify giving him the full mid-level exception. But because he hasn't proven anything in the playoffs, it's hard for Okoro to get a contract that matches his worth. $8 million a year would put him on par with George Niang, and that just sounds crazy for a player who is a massively impactful defender and still holds a ton of weight in terms of his potential as a 3-and-D prospect. Okoro is just 23 years old, and he's already established himself as a borderline all-defensive caliber player. He's by far the best point of attack defender on the Cavs, and I think Okoro deserves more credit for his role in turning Cleveland into an elite defensive team. The Cavs don't reach those heights defensively without Okoro checking the perimeter night in and night out. But of course, anyone with eyes can tell you that opposing teams do not respect Okoro as a three-point shooter. He is routinely left open, and the previous coaching staff couldn't find a way for Okoro to contribute offensively, aside from standing in the corner for long stretches. Okoro didn't do much in terms of ball handling or shot creating, and he was essentially invisible, parked in one spot on the floor for most of his time in Cleveland so far. And so if you are someone like myself who believes Okoro has more to offer to this team, then the addition of Kenny Atkinson could be the key to unlocking whatever ceiling remains for Okoro. Given his steady growth as a shooter up to this point, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Okoro can diversify his shot profile and increase his volume ever so slightly to become a more respected three-point shooter. I think placing him in Atkinson's offense will give us a better look at that, and I'd also like to see Okoro handle the ball a little bit more. I don't think it would be a seamless transition, but Okoro has the tools to adapt and grow in this regard, and I think Kenny Atkinson will give him the opportunity to sink or swim, which is something that unfortunately didn't happen under JB Bickerstaff. And that's something that I think underlies this entire issue. The Cavs just don't have enough intel on who Okoro is as a basketball player. He has improved steadily each season, but his growth has lagged behind the Cavs' accelerated timeline. And so, for the most part, Okoro's development hasn't only taken a back seat, but I'm not sure he's even in the car anymore. The Cavs have left Okoro in the dust rather quickly, and entering his 5th NBA season, I just don't think Okoro has been given the chance to succeed or fail. The Cavs have worked so hard to hide him offensively that I almost think we'd have been better off throwing him into the fire and finding out if he can survive. At the very least, in that scenario, we would have a better sense of whether or not Okoro is worth $8 million or $18 million this summer. And so overall, I think Okoro should take the qualifying offer and just work his ass off to prove he is worth more next summer. And now I want to quickly hit on a few sign and trade targets because I do think there's a few scenarios that make sense for the Cavs. For example, trading Okoro, LeVert, and even a first round pick might be a little steep, but landing Cam Johnson would be a noteworthy splash in my opinion. Johnson has the size, legit shooting ability, and connective offensive skill set that the Cavs have been missing on the wing. He would instantly become a starter, which sends Max Strus to a better position as the team's streaky sixth man, and it opens the door for Jalen Tyson to play backup wing minutes early on in his career. The Cavs roster construction and hierarchy just makes way more sense to me if you do this trade, and so I would sign up for it in a heartbeat. The other Nets contender is Dorian Finney-Smith, who I personally don't feel moves the needle. He's a better shooter than Okoro, but he's not exactly a game changer on offense. He shot just 40% from the field over his last 2 seasons, and Okoro is at least very efficient attacking the rim, whereas Smith is much more reliant on his three-point shooting, which also isn't anything great at just 35% for his career. Dorian Finney-Smith might be a taller wing who has earned more stripes as a shooter, but he fits better on paper than he does on the actual court in my opinion. I think Okoro is currently the better player because of his defensive ability and his effectiveness at the rim, and Okoro is also 7 years younger, so I just don't have much interest in this swap. And then the last guy I think is worth mentioning would be DeAndre Hunter. Now I think Hunter is a guy who has a reputation for being more of a 3-and-D wing than he has ever actually been in my opinion, but he does fit the mold better than Okoro does. Hunter is much taller, he's a much better shooter, and just a better overall offensive player. Hunter's skill set would definitely make him the starting small forward in Cleveland, which again gives you the same trickle-down effect I mentioned when adding Cam Johnson. And so I would be on board for a Hunter-Okoro swap because I think that has the potential to actually move the needle. But that's all I have for today. I'm super interested to see how this Okoro situation plays out. Like I've said before, I just think Okoro is a genuinely impactful player who is only a small step away from being a real 3-and-D wing. I don't think the guy has a crazy high ceiling or anything, but I'm always confused by how many people think Okoro just flat out sucks. He's a really helpful basketball player, and I can't wait to see how his career unfolds, whether it's in Cleveland or somewhere else. And lastly, I want to give a quick update for the channel. Last week, I asked everyone to send me their Cavs thoughts so I could react to them in a video, and I still plan on getting to that. I was a little busy last week, so I couldn't get to it then, but I plan on doing that ASAP, so I just wanted to update you and say thanks to everyone who sent a comment. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to recording that video. And with all that being said, go Cavs!